Hello, this is Margaret Herzog again with the Bureau of Indian Affairs Climate Change Program to go through a demo now of how to use the Tribal Climate Resilience Resource Guide that was developed by the White House Council and Native American Affairs Climate Subgroup with support from all federal agencies involved with tribes and climate. So to get started, we're going to go to toolkit.climate.gov, and then Topics Tribal Nations was developed last year, so I'm going to quickly go over that first. You can see that it has an introductory summary that highlights the traditional knowledge with the guidelines for considering traditional knowledges and climate change initiatives. And then along the side, you'll see it goes to each of the 6 subtopics I mentioned in the user's guide: assessment and planning, adaptation, mitigation, disaster risk reduction, relocation, and capacity building. Now, each of these topics, you're going to see some taking action stories where tribes have worked to build resilience in that particular area, as well as featured tools they've used and found useful as they've worked through the process, and some other tools and information as you work your way in. And we'll go through this once we're in the toolkit. So now that we're at Tribal Nations, a quick way to get to the toolkit, and there'll be links in the Tribal Nations toolkit here in Tools to this, but for now we're just going to change the link to be toolkit.climate.gov/tribal. And that'll get us right to the user interface. So the first one we're going to pick, you can see how I scroll over one of these icons and it gets right to that particular area. I'm going to choose agencies first to show you how to use the quick links and the fact sheet. So if we zoom in a little bit here, so we're just looking at the first major agency, which is the Department of Interior. You can see that it has some quick links. So if we click this first quick link that goes to the Tribal Climate Resilience Program, it'll jump us right there. Now if we scroll to the side, this also has Tribal Climate Resilience Resource Guide in it. So you can jump right back that way. Another way to get to it is if you're at the Bureau of Indian Affairs main level, just BIA.gov. You can choose this category selector, climate change, and that'll get back to the resource page where again you can scroll down the side and choose Tribal Climate Resilience Resource Guide. Now, once you're in the agency page, other things you can get to are the Climate Science Centers. These are 6 regional centers which will get you projects, oftentimes data and resources, and you see there's 6 of them plus Alaska. Now this year, the Bureau of Indian Affairs is also putting a climate liaison for tribes in each of these centers to help them work more effectively with the community and support their needs. Another important link is the Landscape Conservation Cooperatives. So if you click this quick link, it gets you to all of them by location throughout the United States. And I like to go in by the map because it's a little easier to see. Now what's neat about the Resilience Guide is you don't have to go to these separately and find them. You're going to see how each of these resources you need, you don't have to figure out which one you're in, because when we go to the resource guide for a particular tribe, we'll be able to get back to that, and I'll show you that. Now if we go into any of those 3 detailed views, such as the Bureau of Indian Affairs detailed view of tribes and climate, that's going to list all the technical support, funding, and resources that it provides. So it has information related to agriculture and rangelands. It lists some grants for mitigation that are supported through what's called our Indian Affairs IEED grants program. It has training for Native American Waters Corps every year. So it shows all the details of what that agency can do for tribes and climate. Another one that is of interest might be the NOAA that I showed during the resource guide, and you can scroll down to that. There's also NASA, all the ones that have different resources for tribes. And here you'll see there's a lot of different CRT tools and examples. So if we go to an example of how the NOAA has worked with the Western Alaska Landscape Cooperative and tribes and tribal groups, it'll get back to their story in the toolkit where you'll see tools, topics, additional resources, and partners. So it's a great way to see which agencies are working with tribes. It's a great way to see which tribes are doing different things by going through the Tribal Climate Resilience Resource Guide to get there. Now, if we close out the agencies link, they all pop up, so you have to close them when you're done. You can go to regions. So one of the ones that have been more specifically development in this region by month outreach was starting with the Alaska region. So you can either click on Alaska region up top, or you can look at the map and find the Alaska region and to that particular fact sheet. Inside the fact sheet, you see this new top part that's not in the agency page. And what's neat about this is it doesn't just goes to the Bureau of Indian Affairs region, but you can also click on this affiliated tribes link, and that'll show you all the tribes that are located in Alaska that are federally recognized. And then if you want to get to one of them in particular, remember that I said use the quick filter to just jump to that one. So if I jump to Una, then I'm going to get to the Una Alaska or the Unicalete web sheet, and then I can click really easily into it. Another thing about the regions is, remember I said you can get back to any of these detailed pages. So if I want to go back to the NOAA page, I just click it here. A new web page will open with the NOAA fact sheet details. Now let's say I want just regional information. Well, then I hit the orange link instead of the blue one, and that'll get me to the regional information that has available. NOAA has two type regional layers. They have the regional climate centers and the regional climate service directors, and they have different information for each, so that way you can link into them and find more localized information. Similarly to the agency pages, there's tools and examples that are particularly useful for that region, as well as regional groups that if you click in, it'll get to a particular group that's either received Bureau of Indian Affairs funding or other funding to develop information of interest. Okay, and now if we go back to the tribal page, after going to the regions, that will collapse out. If you go to the tribes icon, you'll see tribes, TCUs, and intertribal groups. We picked one of them by going to the quick filter and putting in a few letters of a word, and then that jumps it right to it. Once again, you can get to the agencies or the regional agency information. Or another thing you can do is groups that it's associated with. So this particular tribe is associated with the Aleutian Pribilof Island Association, which is its native association. So you can jump to that page and see if it's developed any particular climate resources too. So in this case, they've won a climate award. It also links back to each of the tribes, and they've also been an example on a case in the toolkit, so you can jump back to that as well. So what this does is it just makes a framework where you can get all the information at your fingertips much more easily, whether it's in agencies, regions, or tribes. Now these 5 upper icons get to just a single page that focuses on funding, training, planning, traditional knowledges, or youth. When you click on a training page, it'll show you some of the training that tribes find useful to use travel support for. So in terms of adaptation planning and vulnerability assessments, they use NOAA adaptation planning or webinars. There's also a calendar of events. They also go to Fish and Wildlife NCT training. If they're looking at other strategies such as disaster risk reduction, they might go to FEMA training. Or if they're interested in mitigation, there's Department of Energy training they may use. If you go to planning, that will get you right to tribal nations topics that relate to those particular strategies. Seems to be a little slow. Another important page is the traditional knowledge page, which also seems to be a little slow today, and also youth. And we're having a little trouble getting to them, but those will provide particular resources, as I mentioned in the user manual video, on those particular topics of interest. So check those out, and we'll redo this video when we have a better connection. Thanks.